Hi everyone, it's Don and I hope you're having a fantastic week. Well, I just got back, landed last night, and sure enough, I had a pretty scary flight. And not because of anything particularly on the flight itself, just what happened beforehand and the things leading up to it. And so I just have to explain it. So I'll explain it right after this. So a couple of days before my cruise ended on the MSC Bellissima, I was turning on the news stations and all I saw on the news, the two channels that I got, and then in all the other language news channels as well, was about the Ethiopian airline, the MAX 8 that went down and how all those planes are now being grounded and the crash. And first off, my complete condolences to the families and anyone involved who knew, friends, families, anybody on board that flight. It's tragic when an airline goes down in this situation. It's one thing to have a mishap on the air and skid off the runway or something like that, but when the whole plane is lost, it's devastating, and you really don't expect it nowadays. But that's all that was in the news. Like literally, that's wall to wall was in the news over and over again. So I'm already, I'll admit, a nervous flyer. You would not know it to look at me. I look very calm on the plane. I can carry on a normal conversation with people. I can make jokes. I'm not gripping the seats. But I'm not one of those people who like to give up control, and flying 40 some thousand feet in the air is not my favorite thing in the world to do. But yeah, when you live in Canada and you want to cruise, you got to fly everywhere you go. So I was getting ready for my flight from Southampton, well, London, to Toronto, and everything was going well. I'm on WestJet, and as I'm going into the line, I'll tell you this little story as well. When you go up to the electronic kiosks, it gave me the option to upgrade. And normally I don't, because it's like double the cost or more, but in this case it was only like $200 more to upgrade. So I said to myself, what the heck, it's going to be a long flight. It's 8.5 hours. Spoil yourself a little bit, get yourself that little extra leg room. So I upgraded myself to the Premium Plus category, they call it too, which comes with a whole bunch, a lot of extra benefits. And the best thing is you're not, you know how most seats are three and three, and gosh forbid you should ever be in that middle seat for a long flight, because you're just like this the whole time. Who owns those armrests, right? Who controls those armrests? But anyway, I upgraded myself, and we get on board, and they bring me out some orange juice and offer me some champagne, and I'm going, wow, this is pretty nice. I actually like this. However, all that being said, we loaded up the plane, we got ready to take off, we taxied out to the runway, and when you're on the runway and they come to a complete stop, and then you hear the engines revving up, and then all of a sudden you start taking off, and then just as you get rolling, he really throttles open the plane, and you kick back in your seat and you take off like this. And while that was going on great, we're heading about halfway down the runway, and it went meow. All the engines stopped. The pilot completely powered down the engines. We coasted to the end of the runway, and he pulled off at the edge and pulled into a maintenance area. Quickly came on the intercom saying, sorry, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, we had to abort takeoff. There's a indicator light that came on in the cockpit, and we have to have it looked at before we take off. And all right. Just talking about plane crashes in the news all this week, and now I'm taking off and the flight is aborted. So my anxiety level's right up here. There's a lady about 7 rows back from me is like almost freaking out because she's already a terrified flyer. She wants to get off the plane and walk around the stretch to get her air and get out of the plane, but we're in the maintenance area and engines are being serviced all around us and there's trucks. There's no way they're letting her off the plane in that area. So here's the good thing. And I want to give my complete confidence, not confidence, but compliments, I guess confidence as well, to WestJet and the crew that was on board, because first off, they were very accommodating to everybody. They immediately went up and down the aisles. They started handing out snacks, and it wasn't just like, here's some crackers. They brought chips and chocolate and cheese and crackers and nuts, and they said, take whatever you want. Just take whatever you want. So, that was good of them to do, and they were passing out some drinks and everything, making sure everyone was comfortable. And the pilot, literally every 20 minutes, was coming on the intercom and giving us an update, And at one point, about, I think the third one in, he says, we think we located the problem, and the maintenance staff is working on it. But I just want to stress that here at WestJet, the safety is priority. And personally, I will not lift this plane off the ground unless I'm 100% confident in it's 100% guaranteed. So safety first. We won't leave if there's even a slight hint at anything wrong with this plane. And that, of course, is the mindset of every pilot, right? There's no pilot out there saying, the plane's about 60% okay, we'll take off. They're not stupid. But it's nice when they inform the passengers and kind of reaffirm the confidence, especially for people who have anxiety when flying. So that was really, really great done. We were there 4 hours on the tarmac, and you hear all these horror stories from airlines sometimes where you're stuck on the tarmac for hours on end and it just becomes like a sweat box, and people are complaining and upset. They're not allowed to get off the plane. They're not handing out water. They're not doing nothing. WestJet did completely the opposite. First off, they opened up the front door, so there was an airflow through the plane itself, and they were up and down those corridors, making sure people had drinks, had coffee, make sure that people had all kinds of snacks, making sure you're comfortable and keeping you informed at the same time. So hats off to them, because this was just great as far as the way they handled it and the way they made sure everyone was okay. Because if you think about it, we were there for about 4 hours, 4.5 hours before we took off again, and it's an 8.5 hour flight. So that's 12 to 13 hours in a plane seat. So it can get very uncomfortable, and I'm really glad that I upgraded, because I had those extra wide seats, the extra wide leg room. They served me a meal on board, and the meal was actually really good. I had served drinks on board, snacks. They gave us a snack on the way in, and my first bag was free. Remember that story about British Airways? Well, this bag was free. So for $200, as far as I'm concerned, especially with what happened, those extra seats were really, really benefit to purchase. So as a hint, not necessarily buying them ahead of time, because when I first looked at this flight at the premium, it was more than double the cost to upgrade to those seats. But because the flight wasn't sold out, you may be offered a much cheaper rate at the electronic kiosks. Don't be afraid to click on it just to see what the price is. I've seen some cases it's like $50, and that's like basically the cost of your first bag, and your first bag would be free if you upgraded. So it could turn out to be very beneficial to upgrade yourself if you can through the kiosks on the day you fly. That being said, here I am, nothing but bad news about airlines all week. An aborted takeoff. The indicator, now they never tell you what the indicator was, but I was in the second row, and I could hear, because I'm very nervous, the pilot, the crew, and the maintenance staff talking when they were updating each other and the other stewardesses and stewards on the plane. and I heard fire a couple of times. So obviously it seemed that it was an indicator of a fire or a fire hazard going off. And so, yeah, that's not something you want to hear when you're about to fly over the middle of the ocean at 46,000 feet. But true as his word, they got everything fixed. We taxied back up to the runway, and on the way to the runway as we're taxiing, while the other planes were taking off, the pilot would stop, do a complete stop, hit the brakes, and then rev those engines, and you feel the plane trying to go forward, but he had the brakes on and it wasn't going. He was revving those engines just to see if that he can get that indicator light to come back on. And he did it a couple times on the way to the runway. And like I said, I'm a nervous flyer, but you wouldn't know it. But I tell you, I was holding my breath as we were taking off on that runway, and I really didn't exhale much until that fasten seatbelt sign was turned off, because at that point, you know, you've reached altitude and everything's going smoothly and everything seems okay. Otherwise, that seatbelt sign would not have come off. And the crew seemed perfectly fine. They had no reaction from them. So they might go through this kind of stuff all the time. But for me, that's the first time I've ever had an aborted. Sorry, well, it's the second time I've had an aborted takeoff, but this was my first time because of a mechanical issue. The first time that happened was because of a drunk passenger, and they pulled over and kicked the person off the plane. But for myself, like I said, I was nervous, and but I have nothing but compliments to say about WestJet Airlines, and that's probably one of the reasons they're one of my go-to airlines whenever I'm booking a flight. And he was so happy I upgraded my seats to get those premiums, that extra leg room, because sitting there 4 hours and you're a nervous person, I'm so glad I wasn't in some middle seat in the back, because I probably would have freaked out. So that was my somewhat scary situation for myself. Really wasn't in any danger, but in your mind, you're always going to the worst case scenario, right? And so how nervous would you be after hearing that there's a fire indicator light, them working on a plane for 4 hours, and then you're taking off? You're just, I kept on waiting for that plane to bank suddenly to the left and start heading back to the airport. And, but like I said, nothing like that happened. It was just, they found the problem, they fixed it, they double checked it, and we made our way to Toronto. And then to top it all off, after all that, and I'm nervous and I'm on the ground and I'm all happy I'm on the ground, I have a connecting flight to get to Ottawa, and I have to get on a much smaller plane with propellers, not jet engines, to fly back to Ottawa. So just overall, not a fun flying experience for myself. I just thought I'd share it to you that even a seasoned person like myself, who I fly close to 50 different planes a year. Easy. I was on 5 flights alone for this cruise, and I cruise a lot, as you know. So just goes to show you that even seasoned travelers can get a little nervous and get in your own head because of stories on the news. Had that story not been on the news last week about the plane crash, probably wouldn't have affected me as much. But of course, the first thing you're saying when you get on that plane is this a MAX 8? Is this plane a MAX 8? Are we flying a MAX 8? So yeah, but good news is I made it safe back to Ottawa, trying to catch up on work and getting ready for our group cruise coming up in just under 4 weeks, less than a month. How quickly time flies, and can't wait to meet everybody when we get out there on the cruise. So in the meantime, I hope you like this story of me being scared, because it does happen sometimes. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more tips, more tricks, more travel vlogs from around the world, hit that subscribe button. Till next time, have yourself a safe and a great vacation.